Well, welcome back to the Valley Hoops Insider podcast, part of the Valley Hoops Insider website. That man on the screen there with me, Rocco Miller. You guys know about him. He's a big deal now. Rocco, before we get breaking down into all the key things, bracketologist Rocco Miller, I should have said that for the newbies. How long have you been doing this? And how long have you and I been talking on podcasts? I feel like I discovered you, actually. Like, I feel like I'm your key to success in the early days.
Oh, there's no doubt, Harry. There's no doubt. And I mean, the Missouri Valley Conference and Father Harry, that's like the foundation of everything I stand for within college basketball and everything that college basketball should stand for as well as a
You're
whole.
funny.
No, I'm serious because, I think, I look at it through the prism of all levels of college hoops, throughout the year, whether it's in scheduling, trying to get these better teams from the Valley to play better teams from the Mountain West, the American, the A10, the WCC. We've done better with that. You saw Bradley play San Francisco and Santa Clara this year.
Right.
Those things aren't happening by accident, but it's taken a lot of years to get these teams playing each other, to understand how the committee's looking at it. We've also been dealing, Harry, you and I think we've talked probably since 2017, maybe before that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So well before the net even started. The net started in 2019. So we've had a lot of moving goalposts. Now we have to deal with conference realignment. We have the Pac-12 is no more. The Southeastern Conference is much bigger, 16 teams. The Big Ten is coast to coast, 18 teams. Same with the ACC. The Big 12 is bigger. And it's really complicating all the bracket math, if you will. And I'm curious to see where this plane lands, but I hope there's room for some of these little guys.
Before we move forward, I'm a journalist, right? People all know Lenardi and Jerry Palm and Mike DeCourcy, those guys, and I've talked to all those guys and respect them. But when I go to see who the best bracketologists are, you far outweigh all of those guys in terms of your annual stats and your 3-year trends and all of that. I think number 9 over the last 5 years you are across the country, something like that. Top 10, and all those guys are 70, 80, 150. But for some reason, if they have 4 letters attached to their name or some big website, people think they're the experts.
Well, there's a lot of thoughts that I have about that. One, I'm friends with most of those guys as well, and they work hard. They have a lot different layers of responsibilities than someone like me. Now, I've obviously taken on a lot more responsibilities over the years myself, so I'm doing my best to get up to their level when it comes to all the different appearances and trying to educate the public on the process. And but my groundwork, my foundation within the website of bracketeer.org has always been to try to understand and kind of figure out exactly how the process works within the committee room. What are the things they care about? What are the things they don't care about? How do you compare teams? And so I do a lot of work in the off season and even with some of the contacts during the season to see how they're thinking about certain teams, how the committee might talk about them. And then I also have a lot of background on the history of the committee. And a lot of the committee decisions, Harry, are kind of like a court of law. You go to any kind of new trial or some, it's lawyer talk. I don't know a ton about it, but I know lawyers always need some sort of precedent if they're trying to win a case. So like for me, there's a lot of these little nuances to resumes where a team, if XYZ has happened to them or they haven't won a road game at this level, they've never been selected before. I have all those types of stats. Wow. So I think it helps me with the selection process. I typically will get 67 out of 68. There's always one weird one. In fact, last year I did get the weird one with Virginia getting in. I was right about that, but I was bold and had Michigan State out. I didn't think they belonged in, and the committee made me look foolish, and they put them as a 9 seed. So you just, there's still a lot of variables in this. But for the most part, that all of that on top of the fact that I serve on 2 committees that are quote unquote mock committees, we go through and simulate the entire process for an ungodly amount of hours. I wouldn't suggest it to anybody, but I like it because it helps me see a team differently than what I can see on my own. And I think that's what the committee experience is all about too. You want to know what's good about a team and what's bad about a team and where they should probably land.
I think you ought to make me go to one of those. I'll just take notes. I won't say anything because I'm not that smart. Let's talk about the ground rules a little bit for the selection. Obviously, you just enumerated all kinds of things that we won't get to.
Right.
The common fan looks at the net and says, well, Drake is a 50, whatever. Okay, they ought to be in the bracket because they're in the top 68. It's not that simple. Give us a few of the nuggets about how the committee decides what they decide.
Well, yeah. So you're basically starting at the very top of the sport and you're comparing the best teams. And then you're going from there and you're building a seed list all the way from 1 through the 68 that get in. Now, when the process starts, they'll usually get started around Tuesday of that second championship week. So by the time they even start, the Missouri Valley is done. So all the results are in the barn for the Missouri Valley. Not many leagues get that luxury. A lot of the power leagues, all the power leagues, in fact, they're bringing in results as they go through the process. And that's why you see a lot of the results that happen in championship week from the power leagues not get factored in as much, and sometimes not even at all, which I certainly don't agree with, but that's just how the process is laid out. And so, once they get going on their process, they're introducing teams. There's a presentation style. There's 12 different committee members, and everybody has a couple of leagues assigned to them. So, for example, our mock committee will start next week, and I'm responsible for these West Coast leagues, which makes sense based on where I am. And it's similar for the committee. So if it's the next team up off the board, you present your case, and eventually you go into voting. So then it's a cross-country score. All 12 members will vote, and they do one seed line at a time. So they'll start with the 1 seeds, 2 seeds, and go all the way down. Now, to be even more specific, on that first day and a half or so, they can select up to 34 teams. We call those first ballot selections. And some years they'll only take like 28, because let's say teams 29 through 34 have something a little bit, that not everybody, it has to be unanimous to be a first ballot. So it's kind of like baseball voting in that way, except for way more teams. And so when you get your first ballot done, then what is left over, it could be another 40 teams, it could be another 20 teams, whatever the number is, that's what's considered their bubble, and they go through a whole different examination by Thursday.
So, but we think about the net. Like I've decided I've created my own little metrics gathering of information. I smashed 5 or 6 of the main ones, and I've come up with numbers. Is it anything like that for them? I mean, they look at those team sheets and their quad 1s and 2s and all of that. And the eye test matters, I assume. And just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, and I think the NCAA has done a better job over the years, being transparent about what is and what isn't on the team sheet. So obviously AP poll, things like that are never on the team sheet.
Right.
But the net is important for your opponent's data, not so much your own data. And I think if anybody had a question about that, it was proven last year when New Mexico, who was number 22, and of course our beloved Indiana State Sycamores, who were sniffing the 30 range, I think at 29 at one point, we're not going to be in the field. New Mexico had to win the Mountain West tournament to get in, which was kind of crazy. They had to beat 4 tournament teams to win the tournament. They did it anyway. But that just goes to show your own net isn't the important part. Even Rutgers a few years ago got in with like a close to an 80 net themselves. So there's no number on your net that automatically gets you in or out. It's actually not even really discussed. But your opponent's net is how you sort the results. So of course that's how you come up with these quad 1, 2, and 3 categories. Now again, I think when you're into these tougher comparisons, you have to dig deeper in these discussions. Like a win at number 76 Dayton, who might be quad 1 after one more win, is not the same as winning at Texas A&M, who's like a top 10 team, right? So again, all those things have nuances. But once you've been looking at these resumes over and over and over again for a month, like I do, it actually starts to sort itself out in an interesting way, to where you can see, okay, this team had 4 really good road wins. Where were they? Are those teams in the tournament? If they're in the tournament, how high up the seed list are they? So like a team like Ole Miss, who won at Alabama, even though they've lost 3 or 4 in a row, it's like Ole Miss still stands out as a team that belongs. They've won at Alabama. They've done some other road damage as well. And so that's how you anchor, what we call anchor your resume with with those big road wins or even neutral court wins.
So Drake's win against Vanderbilt, which keeps
Huge.
improving, and their win against Kansas State, which has been improving as well, helps them out a great deal. What we've been hearing is every year there's like a new metric that they break out on us and say, well, now this is really important. And wins above bubble or something like that. Tell us what that is and how vital is that?
Wins above bubble, it's been popular in internet circles, guys like me and others for years. The true purpose of it is to say, okay, if every team in the country played Drake's schedule, how many teams would have a better record than Drake? And it's down to the decimal point, right? So somebody might have, if they say San Diego State would have had 0.1 more wins, it's broken down to that level. I think that last check, Drake was around 40th in that metric. So they're basically telling us that against Drake's exact schedule, only 39 teams in the country would do better than what Drake has done. And everybody 41 and below would do worse than Drake. And typically it's the way they try to cut it off is they have a plus minus for every result. So even if you beat a bad team, let's say you beat Valparaiso at home, it still moves your needle up a little bit. It's going to be a small incremental move versus when you beat Vanderbilt, which is a much bigger leap in that decimal point system. But they're basically saying each of your results have some level of value. And if you lose to a bad team, of course, that's going to sink you. So a lot of people love that system because they basically make that, let's just call it C level for easy explanation. C level is basically around the top 44 because 44 teams is about where the cutoff line on average will be for who's going to be in that large and who is not. So you look at it right now, I think they've done a really good job with it. I checked it this morning. I think 43 teams are above sea level and team 44 is like negative 0.002. You basically can include them as above sea level, right? So that's how it works. And so as the results keep coming in, that keeps shifting based on all the formulas trying to explain to the committee, hey, listen, Drake plays a wildly different schedule than Arkansas, right? So how do we in a million years compare Arkansas and Drake? And there's really no true way to do that. But this gives them an extra tool to look at, and maybe in some of those examples, it'll be leaned on more. But they still have the strength of resume, they still have the KPI, which are both resume based. There's still a million other things you can look at, like road record and all the things traditionally that matter. So I don't know exactly where the wins above bubble is going to fall, but I think it's only going to help, which I think is a good thing.
Let's say Drake wins out. They win Saturday, then they win their 3 games at Arch Madness. That gives them 4. I guess they've got 30 wins by then. And they win out. What is their ceiling in terms of a seed spot for the Drake Bulldogs?
Yeah, well, Drake's in an interesting spot because I think resume-wise, even if they lose in Arch Madness, assuming they win the finale, I know they have a quad 4 opponent to finish the year, but as long as they finish the regular season with a win, their resume is in great shape to get selected regardless of Arch Madness outcome. I think that's the best news. Seeding-wise, they're in a little bit of a bind because that is where tools like your own net and tools like Ken Palm, now Bart Torvik's part of that, and others are basically used to help assist with seeding. So I don't think Drake's going to win a lot of those comparisons, which really limits their seed. But I also don't think that that's necessarily bad news. Like I've had a hard time moving them up to a 10 seed line. They got there for one of my exercises, by a smidge. So I think they'll end up a 10 or 11. But if I'm a Drake fan, I'm rooting for the 11 seed because your percentages to make the second weekend as an 11 seed is almost 10% higher than as a 10 seed. Obviously, you don't have to face the 2 seed in the second round. 3 seeds tend to be a little bit more beatable. So if I'm a Drake fan, I'm kind of happy where I'm at. What's the point of trying to work your way into a 10, 9, or 8 where you're just going to have a brutal second round matchup?
So you're telling me that if they win on Saturday, they're basically in the tournament. That is what you're saying as of now. There could be bid stealers and all those kinds of things, but you think that they are fairly safe.
I do, only because the rest of the bubble is not very strong, Harry, and because I think they've earned it. There's both, like it goes both ways. They've won their 4 hardest games. They've beaten teams that are above the bubble. Certainly Vanderbilt Kansas State was hot for a while, but they also won road games at UNI and Illinois State. Obviously, that UNI won a little controversial, but it still counts. And here's the kicker: they're 12-1 away from home total, and that's just miraculous. I think last year we saw Indiana State take a fourth loss, where Drake's just got the third before Arch Madness. So I think Drake's got a neck above, because not only do they have a little bit stronger records and they're higher up in the quads, but they're also just sitting at 3 losses still, and I think that's huge.
If somebody is watching this and they go, well, I want to look at something that's going to give me the best idea about where these teams are going to finish, is there one of those websites, whether it's Ken Palm or Bart Torvik or Warren Nolan, or is it just looking at the bracketeer.org bracket? But I'm thinking about the metrics themselves. Is there one metric that's most helpful for the, couch cushion guy that I am to have a clue?
For sure. Well, I think, if you're trying to predict future games, I think KenPom's just the easiest and simplest to use. It's all color-coded in green and red for wins and losses.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can actually, once you start diving in, it doesn't take a very advanced fan or basketball community member to start to understand what all this data means, whether it's 3-point percentage, 2-point percentage, et cetera. But even just going basic wins and losses, he'll build in a little final score prediction for the future games. Now, the other thing you're asking about, where I come into play, and tools like the wins above bubble and whatnot come into play, that's just all about what you've already done and you can't take away. So it's everything that's done. And if we ended the season right now, this is what it would look like. That's the purpose of my site and my forecast is, I'm never going to, even if, who's the best team? Auburn. Even if Auburn's predicted to win their next game on Saturday, I'm not going to give them credit for that win. They're going to have to go earn it. And that's the case with every single game on the books. And so, you're looking at it 2 different ways. One's what we call result-based. The other is performance-based. So what KenPom's trying to do is tell you how good this team is performance-wise, and he's applying that towards future predictions.
When I look at your bracket and then I compare it to Joe Lunardi's or fill in the blank, some other bracketologist, you guys would be largely similar because you're looking at all the same data. Right. And you have Team X as a 10 seed in one location, and they have him as they're an 11 in a different location. Is that kind of like I've got these 4 on the 10 line, and my worst 10 is his best 11, and so it's readjusted. I mean, is it just kind of that minute in terms of how different your guys' brackets are?
In a lot of cases, actually most cases. So, that's why I think if you're following along on Twitter or, your YouTube as well, I'm part of the Field of 68. They have me on the live reaction. So even if you just want to watch the selection show in peace on CBS, by all means do so. But come back and watch our reactions. You'll hear our reactions like we freak out a little bit when we're off by 1 because we're not expecting. We've looked at this so closely.
Sure.
So I think last year the Mountain West really stood out because I felt like most of those teams, with the exception of San Diego State, got underseeded. We had Nevada like a 7, and the committee gave them a 10. That was just, something like that will just throw you for a loop because you've stared at this so much. And then Boise State and Colorado State, of course, being the big ones. They sent them both to Dayton. I think myself and a lot of the guys I work with closely on these mock committees, we all agreed they were clearly above Dayton level. So there's some, you kind of wonder how it lands there on some of those cases, but the rest of them we're right about. So you also don't want to second guess yourself either. In the playing game thing, I feel like maybe certain conferences like the playing game because you do have a financial edge.
Yep.
If you win that game, you get a full financial unit for your league. So who knows? Maybe the Mountain West wanted 2 teams in those games. Those are just the things we have no insight to, but all we can go off of is the data that they look at.
Could Fred, watching this YouTube video, say, well, I'm just going to look at Rocco Miller's bracket and I'm going to tweak 1 or 2 names and then throw it up on a website someplace and I could get listed as a bracketologist? I mean, are there guardrails at all in terms of protecting? Like what is it called? Bracket Matrix or whatever. That's where I went and researched some stuff. I mean, are there some guardrails? Like I have to prove like my math or something like I had to do when I was a kid in school?
There should be, but yeah, there's really nothing stopping Fred from doing that on YouTube. And that's, I've gotten to a point now where that's fine in my eyes. I used to get really upset about it, I'll be honest. And but my main goal was to try to drive education around the process, and that still is my main goal. So whether or not I'm on a major network soon or not, certainly a goal, but I want that information to be prevalent. Like, one of the reasons I wanted to be more public about all this is you're watching a broadcast, and I've done some color commentary. I announced the event in Canada. I had a great time as an analyst. Hopefully I'll do more of that down the road. And I get how hard that is. But when the analysts and the play-by-play guys start talking about bracket seeds and this is what's on the line tonight,
sure,
most of the time, let's just say they're not accurate, and it's completely. And maybe the networks like that. So I'm not going to fight it. But that's part of why I want to get my voice out there more, is just to provide that education. So, if Fred or anybody else respects me enough to want to copy some of my work, I'll take honor in that. If I lose to them on the bracket matrix, it's no big deal anymore to me. I'm more just competitive with making sure I'm ahead of the network guys.
Which you crush, by the way, every year.
Right. So, I just want to make sure my process is working and learn where it's not. And then I think the other thing is we have a big group of the mock committee guys that agree with kind of where you're coming from. They started something this year called Banner Brackets. You can check that out, where they're basically already picked 25 people. I'm in the 25, where they're just going to compare us. So the rules are you have to post a bracket every week starting like January 15th, right? So you've been involved the whole process. You're not just showing up. We call them like the Internet Selection Sunday celebrities, because some of those guys on Bracket Matrix, they do one bracket a year, and then sometimes they'll win it. And we're like, that's not exactly fair. You're kind of just showing up out of the blue. So they're going to do it.
That's what I would do. That's what I would do. I got nothing. What I mean is I know nothing. So that's what I would have to do. Yeah.
Right. So I think maybe fans will think that's pretty interesting, because then you're going to see 25 people who have been ingrained in this from the beginning with a lot more longevity than a random, because you won't be able to tell by going to a random website, seeing a forecast, knowing if it's any good, because a lot of those are pretty bad projections too. I've looked at them in the past.
We love yours, and bracketeer.org. If folks want to go there, you should. I go there several times a week just to know what my teams are doing. Let me ask you a couple other teams outside of the Valley. The OVC right now, Southeast Missouri is leading that league, and they're going to have a big weekend this weekend. They play SIUE tonight, and SIUE and Little Rock play on Saturday before they start their tournament Wednesday. A lot of things could happen in Evansville. The OVC team, every bracketologist has them in Dayton right now. Is there any chance an OVC team gets beyond? I don't mean they play beyond Dayton, but they're going to be anywhere but Dayton on that opening week.
There's always a chance, because if there's major upsets in other tournaments, it could be somebody lower on the totem pole than SEMO, let's just say. And let's say SEMO is the strongest candidate, and I'm not certain that they are, but I know them and Little Rock are close to the top. If they hold strong, win that event, they might end up, because basically you're just comparing 1 through 68. So right now it looks like the OVC champion is going to be somewhere around 66 or 67. So darn near the bottom, which is why you're seeing them in Dayton. Mm-hmm. But if there's some shocking upsets in other brackets where, and it's almost guaranteed if a team with a losing record takes the auto bid, they're going to go to Dayton, right? So those types of teams would go below SEMO. So in that example, it's not a guarantee, but you would need those types of results to come in, and then they would just get pushed up one spot at a time. They probably need to be pushed up five or so spots to have a shot at a 15 seed. Otherwise, they probably just get pushed up to a 16 versus 1 anyway, just avoiding Dayton.
Yeah. Some old friends. I know, man, I watched this game last night, Oklahoma's game last night. I love Porter Moser and want him to succeed. A tough loss for them last night at home. They're in trouble, aren't they?
They are in trouble, but in a wild way, it's easy to look at that 4-11 conference record and be like, there's no chance, because in history, nobody's ever finished in any league worse than 7-11 and got in. So if you just go off that, it tells you Oklahoma has to win out. And that's a bit daunting because the rest of their schedule is still loaded. Mm-hmm. I'm just taking a peek right now. They have at Ole Miss on Saturday. They host Mizzou, who's excellent. And they got to go to Texas to finish. So they could easily finish. There's probably a better chance they finish 0-3 than finish 3-0, to be completely fair. But here's the good news for the Sooners. They went 13-0 in the non-conference. And it wasn't just no non-conference. It was
they've got some nice wins.
They got it. Yeah, they beat Michigan and Charlotte, who's in contention for the Big Ten title. Of course, they beat Arizona. They beat Louisville, who had a way better year than they could have ever expected. They had some decent wins. Providence and Oklahoma State ended up not being great, but they're still in the top two quads. And then, of course, in the league, they've won at Arkansas. But it's their only true road win. And there's another stat. This is a big one for Oklahoma, in my opinion, that if you haven't had at least 2 true road wins, I don't think anybody's from a power conference or any conference. I don't think anybody's ever been selected. And their last road game, they have 2 road games left. I just said that, Ole Miss and Texas. So they have to win at least one of those. The other kicker is if anybody's ever going to break the barrier of the 7-11 rule, if you will, it would be this team, because right now, if you combine all of their records and take away quad 4, that's an exercise I do all the time just to try to narrow it down, because quad 4 results at this level is pretty much ignored. Oklahoma is still sitting there at 10-11. So you could hold your nose and take them today, even still. But once they go 2 games under 500, I think that's a deal breaker. And with 3 games to go, we all know they're either going to land. If they go 2-1, they'll be 500. I think you can take them. And I think that's what they're going to have to do, go 2-1. And of course, if they do that, they'll get that extra road win that they absolutely have to have.
James Madison, our friend Preston Spradlin is there, and they are going to, I think they've secured at least a tie for the championship. And I've looked at some of the places. I think some folks, let's see, I've got it written down here somewhere. Anyway, James Madison, some people have them around a 14. What a job he's done their first year in the new league. But talk a little bit about their opportunities.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because the Sun Belt just went to that wild bracket. So I don't know if you've gotten to see that, Harry. Have you seen that?
No.
So what they did was, and check it out after we're done, they basically made it a 2 teams get a bye every single round. So if you finish in the top 2, you're going to play in the semis, and you might play a team that's absolutely exhausted. So they have 7 rounds. It's insane. They're playing 7 days. It would be good for other leagues. I'm not knocking the idea.
Right.
I think it's a horrible idea for the Sun Belt because these teams are so even. Like, there's been a different leader almost every week. I think everybody would agree Arkansas State's got the most talent. Troy's got the most veteran leadership. James Madison has really figured it out here down the stretch, and they're benefiting from some of the carnage. And there's other good teams too. South Alabama's been great. So what's going to happen here is, I don't know at what level, maybe it's for second place, maybe it's for fourth place. There's going to be a bunch of ties. And if you lose those tiebreakers, you're going to have to play extra days just to catch up with a Madison who's a 1 or a 2. It's pretty wild. But that's good news for JMU if they finish in the top 2, because they'll only have to win 2 games. And like I said, there's a decent chance they'll play an exhausted team in the semifinals.
Darren DeVries at West Virginia, the Sun out for the season, but they've continued to win some games, and they look safely in the tournament as well.
They do. I mean, they've got the wins, so it's not the wins, but it's more like the same as Oklahoma with the wins and losses balance. The quantity of losses have started to pile up for the Mountaineers, and that's become a problem. They're just 5-8 in quad 1. You go all the way out to quad 3, and they're fine. They're sitting there right now at 12-11. But again, they're not safe. They could lose their last couple and be on the outside looking in. That's exactly what just happened to Baylor. Baylor's gotten cold in that same league. So when you're at the power conference level and you play so many big games, you just can't take on too many losses. And West Virginia has been toying toeing that line, but they got to win the other night. That was really big. I think they've got a couple wins of cushion. So maybe just one more at least to secure their spot.
Before I let you go, there's a lot of talk about expanding the tournament and to 72 or 70 something. And then there's conversation about, well, if they do that, would they, I don't know, save some of the mid-major people, meaning like, would they make some kind of provision that so many mid-majors would have to get plied in? What do you think is next for the NCAA tournament in terms of the size and provisions that they will put in?
Well, I don't think they're expanding the tournament for our health. So usually when there's a big move at the top, it's to benefit some of the power brokers and obviously get more money flowing into the sport, more eyeballs on more rounds of basketball. So sure, some mid-major teams could benefit from those extra spots. But if you're looking at this year as an easy example, that would allow room for your Ohio States, your Georgias, your Baylors, your North Carolinas, and your Texases to get in. Maybe out of all those, you could squeeze in a George Mason or a San Francisco. But in the grand scheme of things, the majority of those spots are probably still going to a power league. And I would be ignoring all of precedent and all of history if I thought mid-majors were going to get protected. So I'm certainly not expecting that. And I wish I could tell you different. And if I had any kind of say, I would go to bat for that. Because it would make those games more interesting if they made all of them a mid-major versus a power. I think we would all love that and relish that. But I don't think that's what this is all about, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Just, we hope against hope, Before final kind of thoughts, bracketeer.org. That's where you want to go and watch, read Rocco's stuff. The best bracketologist out there that you've heard of. I mean, there are people out there that maybe I haven't heard of that might be better. I don't know. But of all the names that people throw around, you far exceed all of their predictions over the last X years. I've been paying attention. You guys have done your own selection show before where you kind of present, this is how we think it's going to do. Are you doing that again this year?
Yeah, so there's a couple answers to that. So one, we have our mock committee, and I guess the bad news for me is it's all during Arch Madness. So we will have the Arch Madness games on while we're in our meetings, so we're not going to miss anything. But it really prevented me from getting to St. Louis this year. Hopefully we can change the weekend next year. So that's actually going to be going on while you guys are all in St. Louis. But that night, after your championship game's over, we'll do a selection show. And of course, so it's only going to be based on what we know that day. Sure. And we'll unveil it just the same way CBS does. And then there's a second answer to that because I am part of Fielding the 68. It's our bi-weekly bracketology show on the Field of 68 platform. And that's Mondays and Fridays, 5 p.m. Eastern. Every other show going forward is going to be a reveal style. So you're going to get a lot of those from us on there as well. That works a little differently. We actually just have 3 of us that submit our boards, what I call a big board, but it's our seed list as well. And they do a cross country, and then we don't know what's going to happen, so we just react. And then a third answer to that is Jeff Goodman and I on Field of 68 during the actual selection show will be on there reacting live like we've done the last 4 years. So that's a lot of fun too, because you'll get my authentic reactions to the real selections.
So Sunday night of Arch Madness, is there a time for that one just yet?
It will be on YouTube, I want to say, in the evening. Yeah, we'll get that out before. I don't have the set time. Sure. And then, of course, if you miss it, I know it'll be a busy day in St. Louis.
Right.
You can go back and watch that anytime. It's on the YouTube feed.
So Sunday night of Arch Madness, there'll be that one. Every Monday and Friday, you have the other one. And then the reaction show on the actual selection Sunday night. That'll be awesome.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your time today. So appreciate you giving time to, you mentioned you're out, you're on various networks. You're in much more demand all the time. And for you to still carve out a minute for this guy, I appreciate it. I really do.
Oh, anytime, Harry. I would kick them out for you. So thanks for having me. I enjoy doing this every year. My parents find this every year somehow. And they always enjoy learning about it because I don't even think they know how all this works. So it's a good time. Let's keep doing it every year. I appreciate it.
And I did yell at those March to the Arch guys for stealing you from me a couple weeks ago. So I appreciate it. That's Rocco Miller. You should go to his website, bracketeer.org. He is the best bracketologist in America. You'll learn so much by reading his stuff, looking at his brackets. Rocco, thanks for the time.
Anytime. Thank you.
You've been watching the Voices of the Valley Hoops Insider podcast, part of the Valley Hoops Insider website. I'm Harry Schroeder, reminding you, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.